All right. So today we're going to pull back the curtain on the United States government. We're going to look at its source code, the big ideas, the core democratic ideals that it was built on. I mean, how did all this abstract philosophy actually become the law of the land? Well, let's dive in and find out. Okay, so let's start with the fundamental question the American founders were staring down. I mean, think about it. You've just declared independence from a king. Now you have to solve this massive paradox. How in the world do you build a government that's strong enough to actually protect your freedom, but not so strong that it ends up taking it all away? Yeah, so let's frame this whole thing not just as a history lesson, but as a solution to a truly massive challenge. So at its heart, the problem was this incredible balancing act. I mean, the founders were just fresh off a war against a king they said was a total tyrant. So on one hand, they needed some kind of government for basic protection and stability. But on the other hand, they were absolutely terrified of creating a new monster. The entire American experiment really depended on threading that tiny needle between liberty and order. So how did they even begin to tackle a challenge like that? Well, the thing is, they didn't start from scratch. They had what you could call a philosophical toolkit, and it was packed with these really powerful ideas from a period called the Enlightenment. Okay, first up in this toolkit is a really revolutionary idea: natural rights. And you have to understand, in a world that was run by kings and queens, the idea that your rights weren't handed down to you by a ruler, but that you were actually born with them, that was a political earthquake. The argument was simple but powerful. These rights are yours just because you're human. And a key thinker here, a name you've probably heard, is the English philosopher John Locke. His writings were a huge deal for the founders. This whole idea that nobody, and especially not a government, should be able to mess with your life, health, liberty, or possessions, well, that was a direct inspiration for the words that would eventually show up in America's own founding documents. So you might be thinking, okay, if we all have these natural rights, why do we even need a government in the first place? And that's a great question. That's where this next idea, the social contract, comes in. Think of it like a deal. We, the people, agree to give up some of our absolute freedoms, like the freedom to do literally whatever we want. And in exchange, the government promises to protect our most important natural rights, like life and liberty. This deal is the entire basis for a government having any legitimate power at all. And, that leads us directly to the next tool in the kit: popular sovereignty. If the government's power comes from a deal with the people, well, who holds the ultimate authority? Who's the real boss? It's the people. Power flows up from the consent of the governed. It doesn't flow down from some king or queen. The people are the sovereigns. Okay, and to round out our philosophical toolkit, we've got two more really practical ideas. First, Republicanism. This is basically the idea that you don't vote on every single law yourself. That would be chaos. Instead, you elect leaders to go and represent your interests. And second, and this is a huge one, is limited government. This is the idea of putting the government inside a constitutional box with strict rules to keep it from getting too powerful and stomping all over your rights. All right, so we've got our toolkit of ideas. Now let's see how they were put into action for the very first time. This is the moment where all that theory becomes the official mission statement for an entirely new country. And here it is. These are, arguably the most famous words Thomas Jefferson ever wrote. This single sentence from the Declaration of Independence. It's just this beautiful, powerful summary of all those ideals we were just talking about. It really is the moral and philosophical bedrock of the United States. So you can literally see how those philosophical ideas are woven right into the fabric of the text. When it says unalienable rights, that's a direct shout out to natural rights. Governments are instituted among men, that's the social contract. Deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, boom, that's popular sovereignty. And that last part even lays out the ultimate check on power. If the government breaks the deal, the people have the right to change it or even get rid of it entirely. Okay, so this is a really crucial point. It's super important to understand the different jobs these two big documents have. The Declaration of Independence, that's the why. It's the mission statement. It's the grand vision and the list of beliefs. But it doesn't actually tell you how to run a country. For that, you need the how. And that, of course, brings us to the Constitution. If the Declaration was all about the poetic inspiration, the why, then the Constitution is the practical, nuts and bolts blueprint. It's the how that's designed to bring all those high-flying ideals down to earth and make them real. And just look at how it starts, with the most powerful statement of popular sovereignty you can imagine: we the people. It's not an accident that on the original document, those three words were written in this huge, bold font. It was a loud, clear signal saying, hey, the power for this whole thing comes from us, the citizens, not from a king, not from the states, but from us. So, to make sure that power stays limited, the Constitution basically builds this intricate machine with all these interlocking parts. You've got the separation of powers, splitting the government into three branches. Then you have checks and balances, which lets each branch keep the others from getting too greedy with power. And then there's federalism, which divides power up between the national government and the state governments. It's all part of this grand design to make that idea of limited government a reality. But here's the thing, that grand challenge we talked about at the very beginning, that tightrope walk between liberty and order, it wasn't solved for good back in 1787. Not at all. It's actually an ongoing debate, a constant negotiation that has really defined a huge chunk of American history. If you look throughout American history, you see these critical moments where the country has been forced to rethink at balance. I'm talking about the Civil War, which tested the very idea of the country itself, or the Civil Rights Movement, which was all about demanding that the nation finally live up to its own founding ideals. And even more recently, think about all the debates over security versus privacy after 9/11. Every single era brings a new version of that same test. So you see, the job of putting these foundational democratic ideals into practice, it didn't end with the founders. It's a continuous project. It's never really finished. And that means the real question for us isn't just about what the founders believed way back when. The question is, how do we, right here, right now, continue to navigate that delicate and absolutely essential balance between freedom and order in our own time?